Hi, Cristo. How you doing, mate?
Fine, thank you. So, why again? Why yet another Insulate Britain protest on the motorway? A lot of people would say, well, look, you've got your message across now. We understand that you're concerned about the lack of insulation on certain homes and energy bills being too high as a result of that. We get it. We understand. Why inconvenience more people when the message has got across?
Because as of yet, we haven't had a meaningful statement from the government that they're going to act to insulate Britain properly. And in terms of getting the message, I'm not sure whether people have fully got the message yet that, as Sir David King says, what we do in the next 3 to 4 years will determine the future of humanity. It's the most serious situation that we've ever faced as a species. And to be quite honest with you, Cristo, I'm not fully sure that message has got through yet.
And what percentage of reduction would there be in the UK's carbon emissions then if the UK is insulated in the way in which you would like to see that happen?
Around 15% of emissions in the UK.
Okay, do you know that for sure, or is that an estimate? You don't sound very sure about that.
No, I am sure, yeah. If you go to the Climate Change Committee's website, it's around 15%, give or take.
And when that comes to the emissions, therefore, then worldwide, if we are reducing our emissions by around 15% by insulating, won't that have just the most negligible and just really pointless effect on carbon emissions worldwide? I mean,
So
if
what
we're
are you
talking about
saying?
saving the world, I'm just don't really understand what insulating more homes will do worldwide if what you want is implemented.
I just want to be clear what it is exactly you're saying to me, Cristo, because
Well,
I'm not
we
fully
are
clear what you're
responsible
saying.
for about 1% of the world's emissions, right, here in the UK.
Yeah, 1.1, I think it
Yeah.
is, yeah.
So if we reduce that by 15%, well, that's still going to be the best part of 99 point something percent, which the world is emitting in CO2. And so is this not just a slightly pointless exercise? We're already doing brilliantly when it comes to our CO2 emissions.
So what are you saying, Cristo? It's too expensive to
No, I'm saying
decarbonise
it's just
country.
a bit pointless because you're not going to
It's
change the
pointless.
world's emissions because of this. That's what
Well,
I'm
you sound a
saying.
little bit like, like in the 30s, people were saying similar things about Hitler, and what they were called was
Sorry.
appeasers, Cristo. Well, what they were called was appeasers because people said Hitler wasn't a threat. They said that he wasn't a threat at the time, and you're suggesting the UK shouldn't reduce emissions. And to be honest with you, people that take that position in the future, within a few decades, they'll be seen as cowards and traitors to this country.
Liam, I have respectfully questioned your position and your motives behind that and what objectives you would outline. And you sit there and you compare me to someone who would appease a man who murdered 6 million Jewish people. Genuinely, that's your position. That's your media strategy, is it? That I ask you respectful questions about what you think you're going to achieve through your actions, and you compare me to someone who appeases Hitler.
Are you a bit offended? Are you a bit of a
Well,
snowflake?
I just
You're a
think
bit of
that
a snowflake, Christo,
no, I
are you?
just think that it's utterly moronic on your part
Oh,
because
it's
why are
moronic.
you bothering to be so unbelievably rude to someone who's been perfectly respectful? Do you think that that's going to make the public, you're going to be more endeared to the public as a result of that?
I think you're a little bit sensitive. You're coming across as a bit of a snowflake, Christo, to be quite honest with you. But just to be
Well,
clear,
I
you're
mean,
saying that it's a
comparisons
bit
to
too
Hitler will
expensive.
do that to someone, Liam. Yeah.
No, I wasn't comparing you to Hitler. I
Yeah,
was
you're
comparing
comparing
you
me to
to
someone who would
appeasers.
appease Hitler.
Yeah, yeah, which is how history will view people that are taking this position. But just to be clear, you're saying it's too expensive to decarbonise, so we shouldn't
I
bother. Is
haven't
that what you're
mentioned
saying?
the cost at all. I've just said,
Well,
would
you're
it
saying
have
why
any
bother if the
kind
rest
of
of the world aren't
effect
bothering?
on the world's carbon emissions by you doing this? What effect will it have on the world? Which I still haven't an answer to, by the way. But if we only emit 1% of the world's carbon emissions as it would have such a negligible effect on the world's carbon emissions. Is this the correct strategy? Is this something that you should be bothering with?
Well, it's about honour, isn't it, Christo? And integrity. That's what it's about, mate.
Well,
I'm not
firstly,
sure if you fully understand the situation that we're in, but that's what it's about. Well, so maybe that's what you're not connecting to, having some honour and integrity.
Well, firstly, you're not my mate. Let's make that clear from the start. But secondly, why are you
Sorry,
choosing...
I didn't realise you got so offended, Cristo. I'm sorry.
I'm offended by someone like you calling me their mate. Absolutely, okay. 100%. But why do you believe that you have to insult my honour and integrity when I'm just asking you reasonable questions on a radio station where you are here to defend the position of Insulate Britain? I mean, do you think that that's a good strategy in order to get the public on board?
Well, I'm not trying to get the public on board, but you're quite good at offending. You're quite good at offending people on this show, Cristo. I've seen you before. And the fact is, all I'm trying to make it clear to you is that we're in this really difficult position. You know, China are responsible for 24% of emissions. And so basically, you're a traitor if you destroy the economy and try to decarbonize. And you're a traitor if you do try to decarbonize this country, because China are just going to carry on as normal. I appreciate that this is an absolutely terrible situation that we find ourselves in, but it's kind of childish to just say, well, nobody else is acting and neither would I. That's the situation that we find ourselves in. This is the reality. And all Insulate Britain are talking about is that, yes, we will start the process of decarbonising. And when we do that, we will bring millions of people out of fuel poverty. We're going to slash fuel bills as we go into a fuel crisis. We're going to create hundreds of thousands of meaningful jobs, and we're going to give the best value for money for reducing those emissions, which everybody agrees we need to do. Okay, so this is the situation that we're in at the moment. And all I'm saying is I agree with you, Cristo, and I understand. I don't want to offend you, mate, but all I'm saying to you is...
Well, I'll tell you what, if you don't want to offend people, don't compare them to people who appease Hitler. I mean, that would be a media strategy that I would advise you on. Firstly, I mean, I'm amazed I have to actually tell you that.
Cristo, but that's because you haven't understood the reality of the situation.
I understand the reality of the situation perfectly well, thanks very much.
No, you don't.
But it's a perfectly reasonable question to ask. You seem to have a problem with reasonably and politely asked questions, Liam, because I asked you really reasonably what effect this would have on worldwide emissions, which would have led me to also ask, which a lot of people ask in the public, whom presumably you would want the support from in order to try and implement these policies, because it's going to be public pressure on the government that is going to cause the government to implement what you want. Many of the members of the public ask why you don't perhaps take more targeted action towards those countries that are polluting more, because many members of the public don't support what you're doing. Now, those are reasonable questions, and I would have thought that as a representative of Insulate Britain, you'd want to answer them rather than just resort to personal insults.
As I say, you seem to be really offended. I apologise. I thought this was I didn't think there was as many snowflakes on this channel, but I'm sorry if I've offended you, Cristo, but all I've said is to you the truth, okay? That we face this reality. And unfortunately, you haven't emotionally connected with that reality. And I understand
And you think calling people Hitler appeasers is going to help them emotionally connect with your cause, do you?
Well, the fact is that those appeasers locked in 50 million deaths.
Right.
And the fact is that appeasers like you
so you're
now
sticking with that
are locking in hundreds of millions of deaths.
So you're doubling down on the Hitler line, are you, Liam?
There's a historical comparison to be made that people like you are locking in hundreds of millions of deaths with your inaction.
With my inaction. So what personally do you think that I've not acted on then?
No, you're supporting inaction from groups like us, and you're criticising groups like us.
Well, I'm criticising the fact that you're stopping people from being able to get to work. You're stopping people from being able to go about their day-to-day business. And if you were to tell me that you were going to perhaps target those people who are MPs who have perhaps broken their promises when it comes to insulation, if you were going to target their constituency offices, if you were going to target those sorts of people who have let you down, I would completely understand that. You'd actually have my support in doing that. Have you ever tried that?
Yeah, I agree with you.
So have you ever tried that?
what you're saying kind of makes sense, doesn't it? And I agree, the disruption is unacceptable.
So then why don't you do what I've suggested if it makes such perfect sense? I mean, when have you ever tried to disrupt an MP's constituency office or any of the party conferences, for instance, or any more targeted behaviour towards actual members of parliament on housing, on the environment, in order to disrupt their days? When have you done that?
Well, you know, we've been writing letters for 30 years. We've been writing petitions for 30 years. We've been pleading with our government for 30 years. And
you've been writing letters.
Well, they've continued to go up, emissions, haven't they?
But you've been writing letters. So when does it go from writing letters to blocking motorways and stopping people getting to work?
When the government ignore a reasonable demand that their families and their children have a future.
So I go back to my question then. Why didn't you do, after your letter writing didn't work, targeted campaigns on constituency offices, on the Environment Minister, on the Minister for Housing, on those people in government who can actually change things? Why have you gone from writing letters to the government to then inconveniencing the public who are just trying to get to work?
Cristo, are you a journalist?
Yes.
And have you, as a journalist, have you not covered those exact actions that you've discussed for the last 30 years?
Well, I've not been a journalist for 30 years, okay, but so I am the one asking the questions.
But you haven't seen people doing those exact things that you ask of me. They've been done, correct?
Well, do you not think that some of what
have they been done, Cristo, or not?
They've been. Well, the government have set an emissions target.
Why can't you answer the question? Have those
because firstly I set the questions and I've answered enough of your questions. Secondly, Extinction Rebellion and many of these environmental campaigners have got what they wanted. We're one of the only countries in the G7 that has an emissions target. We are all doing our bit by recycling, by getting rid of our internal combustion engines. In London, we have now set to be carbon neutral by 2030. So we're all doing things as a result of those people who have campaigned and have taken out certain forms of action. I'm just asking why yours wasn't more targeted, and instead you seem to want to ask me questions because I suspect you don't have an answer, do you?
Well, no, the reason I'm asking you is because the things you're asking us why we didn't do them, I'm saying to you that as a journalist, you should know full well that they have been done for the last 30 years.
Well, unfortunately, you are here to answer
I'm
questions.
Here because
you
we're
seem
blocking
to have
motorways.
A problem with answering questions to back up your position.
Cristo, I'm here because we're blocking motorways. And all I'm saying to you is those specific things, targeting offices, targeting particular places, they've all been done. They've been done for the last 30 years. Well, by activists for the last 30 years.
Which activists have blocked the Environment Secretary's offices then?
Cristo, you want to make this about activism, okay? And that's fine.
So prove me wrong. Cristo, tell me which activists in the past have blocked
Cristo,
the Environment Secretary's offices, the Housing Secretary's offices. Show me what an absolute fool I'm being by not knowing that. The floor is yours. Go for it.
Well, there's various examples, isn't there, where Extinction Rebellion
the floor's
has done
yours.
those things.
What, well, just targeted alone the Environment Secretary's offices? Which date did Extinction Rebellion do that? I'll look it up.
The Environment Agency. Cristo, you're trying to make this about a specific thing.
Yes.
And you're ignoring the reality of the situation.
No, I'm trying to get you to answer the questions that I'm asking. And because you're unable to do that, because your position is inherently flawed, you've resorted to personal insults. You've resorted to try and throw questions back at me. And you don't know when anyone has targeted an Environment Secretary's offices because, frankly, they never have. Because you want to make a name for yourselves by inconveniencing people, by storming off television shows and by trying to personally insult people. That's why Insulate Britain have only got something like 3,000 followers online, and that's why the public aren't supporting you. Do you know the number of tweets I've got from people saying, oh, the reason he's personally insulting you is because he has nothing else to offer? Don't you think you need to have the public on board? I mean, I'm going to give you the final chance, Liam, to answer respectfully and try and get the public on board with your cause. Off you go.
What we're here to say is to the government is that we would like a meaningful statement from them that they're going to protect the future of this country, Cristo. That's what it is that we're talking about here. Okay, so we're here to demand something from the government. And, you know, they put an injunction out on us last week, and we're continuing to break that injunction. Now, we're at risk of losing our homes, our assets. They're going to raid our savings. They're going to put us in prison for 2 years, and people are continuing to go out onto the motorway. Why is it that you think that's happening, Cristo?
Well, I'm not answering any more of your questions,
No,
Liam, but I really thank you for taking the time to talk to me here on Talk Radio. Lovely fellow that he is, Liam Norton from Insulate Britain.